Hi, I'm Ray Grijalba, and this is The Joy of the Faith. In this video, I'm providing an overview of Dr. Scott Hahn's most recent book, The First Society, just like I did with The Fourth Cup a few months ago. And I've got to say, out of all the books I've read from Dr. Hahn, this is my favorite because anyone can learn something from this. I actually folded the pages, as you can see here, when I saw something that was profound, and my wife was like, Ray, did you fold every page? And I didn't fold every page, but I folded about every other page. There's a lot in here, and I hope to cover some of it in this video. So the thing that I liked about the book the most was that it was focused on relationships, because relationships give our lives meaning. And the way I see it, he wrote this book to reintroduce meaning, because many problems have brewed in our society due to the most important relationship one can have, and that's marriage. He sums it up by saying, divorce is commonplace, young people are delaying marriage or avoiding it altogether, intentionally childless marriages are all the rage, and so on. Dr. Hahn's premise is that restoring marriage will allow us to rebuild society, as strong marriages produce strong families produce strong communities, and strong communities create a strong society. And this is based off of the rationale of Aristotle, who says that man is a social animal. So Aristotle means that we're made for community and we're not supposed to be solely focused on ourselves. Dr. Hahn echoes this by saying, aloneness was the first part of creation the Lord announced to be not good. If we're not supposed to be alone, as both Aristotle and the Bible say, the question is, how do we build the strongest communities? His answer? Through marriage. But what is marriage? In the book, he says marriage has three essential attributes: permanence, exclusivity, and openness to life. And we see that all three of those are being challenged today in different ways. But now we see, how does marriage equate to the first society? Dr. Hahn correlates this saying, the family is the first society children are aware of and a part of. The first community in which children are raised will prepare them, well or poorly, for participation in all the larger communities they will inhabit for the rest of their lives. That's a pretty big deal. Through this we can see the importance of family, and therefore marriage is crucial. But marriage, just in front of a judge is not enough. We see that by the divorce rate. We need the grace of the sacrament of marriage to guide us as a coach would. He gives the example of non-sacramental marriages that are like a football team without a coach. Legitimate, but still missing the element that provides the order and support necessary for success. I've got to say, as a 25-year-old married man, I don't know what I would do without the order and support of the church. Where would I be without every Sunday hearing that I need to grow in selflessness, to love my wife better, to love my family better? Where would I go without the support of the parish and my friends that I've met through church? Some of them who I chased down, right? Marriage is hard enough. We need that order and support to help guide us in these crazy times. And some of you might say, okay, well, my parents got married in the church and, they never got divorced, but they kind of hated each other, and I would not want to be married like them. I'd rather just get divorced, or maybe they did get divorced, right? Well, Dr. Hahn addresses that where he says, personal sanctity is a prerequisite. No grand theories or perfect procedures can make up for a people who have abandoned virtue. As he said, we need to be striving for personal sanctity. It doesn't matter how your parents' marriage was or anything your family or friends do. What matters is, how are you growing in holiness? Because by you growing, you're going to impact your family and eventually the society. But how do we grow in holiness? Through God's grace. But before we go into grace, I want to talk about something that I think is the most important aspect of the book, and that is getting the sexual side right, especially in marriage. He gives the example of, he was, listening to the radio one time, and a 15-year-old called in to Dr. Ruth asking for sex tips to use with his 14-year-old girlfriend. And all she said was, are you practicing safe sex? He was stunned, and all he could think about was desecration. And desecration is taking something sacred and making it profane. And you might be wondering, what is sacred? Well, sex is sacred. And in another talk, Dr. Hahn says that people say sex is good, and he goes, no, Campbell's soup is good, right? People say sex is great, and he goes, no, Frosted Flakes are great, like Tony the Tiger says, Sex is sacred, and it's sacred in that through our sexuality, we can create human life. And if that's not sacred, then I don't know what is. I mean, even in the church, right? There's 3 times that there's a body within a body. A baby in the womb of a mother. When we receive the body of Christ, he is within us. That is sacred. When a husband is with his wife, that is also sacred. These are 3 things that are sacred, and we need to see it as such. If we don't get sex right, we can't get marriage right. And often, marriage, he says, is reduced from a God covenant to a kind of revocable sex license. When sex and marriage becomes solely about pleasure, he says it is like the equivalent of nodding while your spouse talks when you're actually listening to loud music. We've all had a time where a spouse or a friend is talking to us and we're like, not really paying attention. And this can easily happen in the sexual realm if we don't see sex as sacred and it's not properly ordered. When sex becomes the primary focus for one of the spouses, rather than truly loving them, the relationship can spiral out of control. And this is why the sacraments are needed. So by having that grace of the sacrament of marriage and also the grace received from confession, and that order that we previously talked about, spouses can properly moderate their desires and truly love the person and not just the pleasure that comes from them. Because when we're focused only on ourselves, the marriage isn't mutual, and many marriages fall apart then. Dr. Hahn says, it's possible to reach a low point where all our relationships and interactions become ordered to personal fulfillment rather than communal well-being. Yet, the healing power of grace restores our souls the selflessness required to live the vocation of marriage. So while it's easy to mess up, we're blessed to have the sacraments, including marriage, that allow us to get back on track and properly order our lives to best love our spouse and overcome the selfishness that we each battle against. Now we'll go into the grace of the sacraments. The sacraments were basically given to us by Jesus to give us grace. And that grace is extremely powerful. Dr. Hahn says, grace heals, grace perfects, grace elevates. That is one solid trio. Grace heals us from sin as it allows us to forgive and be forgiven in the sacrament of confession. Grace perfects our nature as it allows us to conform to Christ. As we were baptized, we die with Him and rise with Him. We conform to Him. Our nature is changed, and grace elevates us as we get to receive God Himself in the most holy sacrament, the Eucharist. As Dr. Hahn so famously says, we are what we eat. So as we eat Christ, we become more like Him. Isn't that amazing? So I know this all sounds theoretical, but how do we apply this in our daily lives? Well, He gives us the answer. Live lives animated by prayer and the sacraments. If prayer and the sacraments become a priority in our lives, our marriages, our families, our relationships will be, quote, rockin', as Dr. Hahn said. I'm just kidding, he didn't say that, I just made that up. But it's true, our lives will be transformed if the sacraments and prayer are our priority, because grace will change who we are and who our families are. And I want to say that prayer doesn't have to be hours of adoration. Dr. Hahn says, forming habits of prayer begins with little evocations of God throughout the day. A 15-second morning offering, a 5-second prayer of thanksgiving for having been delivered to work safely, a silent petition for a family member who seems troubled. In this way, we become accustomed to appealing to the Lord when trouble finds us. Here he says that prayer doesn't have to be a massive thing, but it's working on that connection that you have with God so that you're always thinking about Him. He even brings up St. Jose Maria Escriva, who founded Opus Dei that my wife's dad's a part of. It's super awesome. And they're really big on offering up everything you do to glorify God. In your works, give it to God. And he quotes him many times. So that morning offering, give your day to God. Give your prayers, works, joys, and sufferings of that day to Him. That is a great gift. But at the same time, I think Dr. Hahn wants us to not be a minimalist, right? Not to do the bare minimum. Because he says later, when faith is reduced to a once-a-week obligation, it merely confirms the prevailing notion that religion is just one aspect of life among many, one that should be put aside in order to participate in the everyday secular world. We cannot expect to go to church once a week and have a family that is dramatically pursuing Jesus. We need to create environments of prayer from which love will grow. He says we need to cling to the sacraments as they're the cure to the radiation of today. Radiation operates by disrupting the structure of DNA, and while our family may be disrupted by the media, school, friends, the grace working through the sacraments can combat these influences. Societies that are focused on the sacraments, aka sacramental societies, are needed for this transformation. One of the most powerful lines in this book is, sin isolates, grace integrates. As we stated earlier, it is not good for man to be alone, so the more families avoid sin, the more integrated they will be. Satan's last battle will be against the family, and by frequenting the sacraments and building strong prayer lives, Christ will restore marriage through us. Dr. Hahn ends the book by saying, the sacramental society is impossible. So we're out of luck. Just kidding. It's going to be impossible on our own, but with Christ's sufficient grace, it is possible. So I highly encourage you to order this book, as this short overview just scratched the surface. This book that is less than 200 pages has so much wisdom, but is easily understood. I promise you won't regret it. God love you.